everyone. Thank you for coming, and thank you, ICA, for hosting this event. Welcome to the 2025 VCUarts Lecture Series. This series launched in the fall of 2020 as a forum to showcase talents and expertise of VCUarts nationally and internationally renowned faculty and alum. My name is Sayaka Suzuki, and I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker, Corey Pemberton. Yay. He's from Reston, Virginia. He received his B.F.A. from VCU Craft Material Studies in 2012 with a focus in glass. Seems like he's been going nonstop since then. He was a studio assistant and instructor at the Chrysler Museum and continued to assist glass artists around the country for about 5 years until he was accepted into the Core Fellowship program at the Penland School of Craft in 2017, which is a 2-year program for emerging artists. For those maybe students that are unfamiliar, you should put Penland on your radar. And he moved to LA to work at Joe Cariati's Industry and LA Glass Center. And in 2019, with a group of like-minded artists, he founded the nonprofit called Crafting the Future. He's now the director of the organization, working to connect BIPOC artists with scholarship and opportunities that creates opportunities for artists and students. Some of his other accolades include residencies at the Pittsburgh Glass Center, Bruket in Norway, Alfred University in New York, Pilchuck Glass School in Seattle or north of Seattle. And some of his exhibitions include solo show at the Robert and Frances Fullerton Museum of Art in San Francisco, Center for Visual Arts in Denver, Contemporary Museum of Arts in Raleigh, North Carolina. He has work in permanent collection at the Museum of Art and Design, Boston Museum of Fine Art, and the Chrysler Museum of Art. I'm sure there's more. His publications include the Urban Glass Quarterly, American Craft Magazine, but also New American Painting. I could go on, but I'm not going to. You could go on the website. He's also kind of a star. Literally. He was in season 4 of the Blown Away series on Netflix. And his paintings have been collected by sports agent Rich Paul. Do you guys know who that is? I had no idea who that was. I had to look it up. LeBron James' agent. So that's kind of a big deal. Adele's boyfriend. So they own his paintings. And singer-songwriter Alicia Keys. So he now splits his time between crafting the future and his studio practice, painting, and his glass work. He continues to strive to bring together people of all backgrounds and identities, not only through his work with the organization, but in his own studio practice. We are very fortunate to call him an alum of VCUarts. Please help me to welcome Corey Pemberton back to Richmond, where it all began.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Is this thing on? All right. Wow. Thank you, Sayaka. That was a beautiful introduction. I took a intro to casting class with Sayaka back in 2009, I think. It's been a while. But it's really great to be back here at VCU and great to be here with all of you and here at the ICA. Thank you so much for hosting me. So I put together this presentation to tell you about my journey as an artist, and I think they gave it some sort of beautiful, flowery, fluty name that has something to do with human connection, and that's because that is a thread that I've sort of established as a through line through all of the things that I do, whether it's drawing and painting or making glass or my work with the nonprofit. It's all sort of comes back to me to a love for humans and creating space and opportunities for others. This is an image that was captured at the Glass Art Society conference in Tacoma, Washington, and we were asked to do a presentation there. And instead of centering the sort of objects that we were making, we created a program that was about the happening. There was like 25 Black glass artists on the stage together, and it was really about us sort of being there in that moment together. I include this image just to show you how cute I was as a baby. But to also just talk about my sort of automatic interest in making. I was a set of beads that I was given on Christmas morning, and I used to love making beaded and macrame jewelry and giving it to people. But I was always either making jewelry or drawing or baking, and always from an early age focused on the figure and people. This was a chalk drawing that I did in high school of a couple of my cousins on the New York City Metro. And I really thought when I came to VCU that I would study graphic design and illustration. I don't know if they're still feeding people this lie, but when I was in high school, they were like, you got to get into graphic design. It's the future. It's the only way you're going to make a living as an artist. When I know lots of poor graphic designers. So I quickly switched directions when I discovered craft and material studies, and I was really mesmerized by glass. And that last slide, sorry, this is on a timer. I'm trying something new. I think it's going to work out. Um, that was from a sort of performance that I did. I completed a assistantship at the Chrysler Museum of Art in Norfolk in my senior year, and we were making work like that was inspired by Jack Wax, our professor at the time, and um, that was really fun for me, but it wasn't exactly where I wanted to be. I was really interested in developing my skills as a craftsperson and sort of figuring out, at that point, I was like, "I wanna be the best glass blower in the world." I'm glad I've given up on that pursuit, but I've discovered Penland School of Craft, and I took a class with the man in the last slide, Sam Stang, that was focused on form and pattern. And Penland, you'll hear me talk a lot about this place, but they invite craftspeople from all over the world who are experts in their field to teach intensive workshops, often focusing on technique, sometimes exploring other aspects of making art. But that workshop with Sam was really informative for me. He invited me to take to work for him actually in Augusta, Missouri, middle of nowhere. So I moved there right after school, and I worked for him in this old garage turned glassblowing studio. And he, at the time, and still today, was doing a lot of craft fairs, sort of traveling the country with a pop-up 10 by 10 booth and selling wares on the street. And I started doing the same. And so these are some images of some of the earlier glasswork that I was making, where I was paying attention to different trends and also trying to pay homage to historical objects. I was looking a lot at the work of different Scandinavian and Italian design houses. And yeah, I started doing the craft fair circuit as well, which I like to mention because I think in academic settings, that lifestyle doesn't always get, hi. Sorry, I'm seeing so many people that I love. Doesn't often people look down on it sometimes, quite frankly. And I made a great living that way for many years. And I mean, if you would have asked me back then if I felt like I was on a trajectory towards like being successful in my medium, I would have told you that I was already there. Like I was making a living selling my work, and I could make whatever I wanted, and I didn't have to share the proceeds with anybody. And I just like to really highlight that as a very viable way of making a living as a artist or a craftsperson. And yeah, I think that that idea of making work in conversation with works from the past was also really appealing to me, and something that I love about craft in particular is that we're often sort of not expected to, but invited to make work in conversation with people from before us. And so I was doing that by trying, but also trying to sort of put my own spin on things. Something that still plagues me every time I sit at the bench is like, how am I going to make this recognizable as my own? So finding this balance between historical homage and developing an artistic voice. So I was doing all those craft fairs and making all that work, and it was great. But I was also sort of looking for inspiration outside of glass. And I spent a lot of time looking at these Zulu baskets from South Africa. And I had this sort of inexplicable connection to them, this curiosity that was fed by Sonia Clark, who was the department head in craft at the time. And she turned me onto this book called Sweetgrass that was about these baskets. And it felt kind of like I was being given permission for the first time, permission that I didn't know I was after, to make work about my identity as a member of the African diaspora. And that connection, I think maybe it has something to do with a longing for my African roots or a knowledge that I may never possess. But I like to imagine that somewhere in my family tree, maybe there were makers of some sort. You'll notice that the finials are covered in little hand-sewn glass beads. There's a detail on the right. And I feel like that process of sort of weaving the beads with the needle and thread and cinching them around the finial, it really increased if anything, that invented connection to the sweetgrass weavers of South Africa. I'm biracial, and so I don't always feel like um, an authority to speak on my identity as either a black person or a white person or this or that. And what I've come to find over the years is that, like, I am, and we were just kind of talking about this, I am the only expert on me in my experience. And so that took a while to discover, and I feel like I'm still uncovering that, but it's a really helpful thing to realize. So these pieces were made at Penland, and just a little technical aside, at Penland, they in the glass studio have these furnaces where you can melt colored glass, and that was a really fun exploration for me. Um, a lot of times, hi, sorry, I keep seeing people. Um, we work with prefabricated color that we get from color distributors, and so this process of like melting my own glass and adding colorants was really fun, and it sort of harkened back to like mixing paints and glazes and things like that. So I started making work that was inspired by those baskets, and it felt a little bit more unique, perhaps, than that earlier production work that I showed you, and it started to help me develop my voice as an artist. And while I'm still proud of that work, the baskets, I and still developing it today, really, I reached a point where I was like, okay, I need to deepen this quest for an artistic voice, something that feels like it is my own, even if inspired by other work in the world. So I did a residency at the Pittsburgh Glass Center. It was my first residency ever, and I started exploring the sort of connection between glass and drawing and painting, and quite honestly, trying to force that connection in a way that I don't know. These works really, they're kind of one-offs for me, but they were important on that sort of journey. I also was experimenting with lighting and thinking about the ways that I could use pattern and light to create drawings. So this next image, these chandeliers that I made for an exhibition at the Pittsburgh Glass Center, I was really thinking about reflection and refraction as a means of creating marks. And I still sometimes dabble in lighting. But I will say this didn't again, didn't really, like, develop into It wasn't the thing. I thought this was going to be like the thing. I'm like, oh, this is the bridge between those two practices. Um, it wasn't. I was very lucky to be accepted into the core fellowship program at Penland. It's a 2-year program where at the time you would live in this 100-year-old house with 9 other artists, and it was very like real world art edition. I don't know. Do you guys even know what real world is anymore? Um, they've since they haven't torn that house down, though I think they should, but they built a new house where the fellows live, and it's really kind of schwanky, and it's got beautiful art that they've commissioned for it. And you live in that house and you work for the school in exchange for tuition and room and board. So over those 2 years, I got to take something like 18 classes for free. And all I had to do was like work in the dining hall or the entertainment job. And I was taking classes in all sorts of different media and processes: stained glass, ceramics, printmaking, drawing and painting, woodworking, photography, textiles, almost every discipline that they had to offer. I skipped metals. I'm sorry, Susie. Um, it just felt really hard and dirty. And I was like, I already do something that's hard and dirty. Like, I don't want to do that. But one of the more influential classes that I took, was with Hillary Waters Fail and Lee Suggs, who are also VCU alum and faculty. And it was just this sort of like return to academia, it felt like for me, after focusing so intensely on craftsmanship. And I was using my brain in what felt like a new way, though in hindsight, I realize it's very similar to the education that I was probably receiving at VCU, but I was just like too high to receive it back then. And just like too like soft and unformed. And so yeah, it felt really good to start thinking about. I mean, I think I was also just like at a place developmentally and like emotionally where I could see the value in talking about my own experience, and expressing that in my artwork, which is like hard to do when you're fresh out of high school and you're like learning to make art and talk about art. Um, but so I started making drawings on paper and in wood and beginning to investigate different forms of like inequality that I was experiencing and expressing that through this meditative drawing process. I feel like as a queer Black man in the craft community, my sheer existence is somewhat unique and political. And so by simply sharing that personal experience, I could bring a fresh perspective to, I mean, hopefully the craft world, the art world, but at the very least to my own work, which became a desire of mine. And I gave up on sort of actively trying to bridge the gap between my drawing and glass practices, which often yielded shoddy results. And I just kind of watched as it happened naturally and just sort of trusted the stuff that was coming out of me. I saw somebody wearing a hat earlier that said something about trust your eyes or something. What does it say?
There's a J-Halter quote. Learn to trust your.
Learn to trust your own eyes. I mean, that's so real. It's like not just your own eyes, but like your own mind and body and spirit and like just trust. So that was a big turning point for me. This piece here was created by gluing together. This is a detail from the last image. It was made by gluing together strips of plywood and then slicing those bundles into neat little tiles. Here's a detail of me creating a smaller one. And it's a process that I arrived at through glassmaking. It's like the Marini process, if you're familiar with glass at all. And yeah, you can see here the little bundles on the table that end up in this sort of like parquet pattern. And it was just this uh, turning point for me, or like a realization that, all the work that I was doing, drawing and printing and working with wood, would inspire new ways of thinking about mark making in glass, which was something I was after, not specifically like mark making, but just thinking about like a different approach to the material. Um, the geometry of this pattern, for instance, I would not have arrived at without that earlier material exploration in cutting up and gluing together the plywood. And these ones, I feel like I arrived at through lots of repetitious pen and ink sort of line drawings. And so nothing like super revolutionary, but I feel like I'm starting to get to a place where I'm not only replicating objects and designs and patterns that I've seen in history books and from instructors of mine, but starting to develop my own vocabulary. Excuse me. I'm gonna go through these quick. This thing is so small. Does it look tiny in my big hand? These pieces here feature hand-formed brass lids by one of my old roommates at Penland named Elliot Keeley. He, I believe, is still the head of the jewelry program at the Baltimore Jewelry Center. Is that true? I think that's true. But that was one thing that I really loved about the program at Penland, but also here at VCU, is that there was all this opportunity for interdisciplinary collaboration. Like, I didn't know how to make that bracelet, even though I did take one jewelry class. But there was somebody down the hall who did. And this like spirit of community and collaboration that made it easy to, connect with that person and dream up the possibilities. These ones here were made at Penland, and they feature hand-formed steel lids that were made by a gentleman named Nate Nardi out of Decatur, Georgia. We did a winter residency together at Penland. I could go on and on about Penland. I love the place so much. I met a lot of very important to me people there, and if anybody wants to talk more about their programs, I'm happy to do so. Another body of work that I developed at Penland and that I'm still working on are these mixed media collages. They take elements from all the different processes and content that I've been exploring and combine them through Tableau. So it's not always hard to tell or easy to tell, sorry, in a photograph, but that one was mostly photo collage, but you'll see in the ones coming up that there's lots of different media that come into the work. Textiles, handmade paper, sometimes glass. This is from Carrie Mae Weems' Kitchen Table series, a series, a body of work that was really big inspiration for me. She uses place as both an anchor and a vehicle for bringing content to the work. So I'm examining the lives of my peers and looking at my own personal relationships, mostly focusing on friends and community members who society has made to feel other in some way. And I'm trying to firstly celebrate them and shine a light on them and depict them in a way that does both that, but also makes space for them to just be and to be relatable to the viewer. I feel like throughout art history, we see a lot of work that takes Black and brown folk, queer folk, and shows them in a light that is either making them seem extraordinary or depicting them in moments of trauma. And so I guess I'm trying to offer a sort of opposition to that. And I hope that the turbulent use of pattern and materials causes the viewer to slow down and really consider what it is that they're looking at and not to simply judge the subject by their cover, so to speak. This piece, you can see in the foreground, the floor is made of wood. I can't remember what kind of wood it was, but it was made in a similar fashion to those parquet drawings that I showed a moment ago. Is it a photograph? Is it a painting? Is it wood? Is it textile? The answer is yes. And just like all of those things, It is all of those things. And just like the subject, it is complex and is worth the time that it takes to understand. So I did a residency in Kinston, a town in North Carolina, a small coastal town. And it was hit by a hurricane, Hurricane Floyd, back in the 90s. And in many ways, it is not fully recovered. There's a very clear divide in Kinston between the haves and the have-nots, or the white and black communities. And this is not uncommon in coastal southern towns where white people live safely up on a literal hill, whereas all of the people of color are pushed below the floodplain. And there's a neighborhood in Kinston called Lincoln City that was so badly damaged by the hurricane that most of the homes were relocated. And the ones that weren't have been completely reclaimed by the forest. It's like super eerie. You're walking through and you can see like maybe a post where a mailbox once was, or like evidence that there used to be a driveway, but now it's just thick woods. And I would walk to the studio every day and I would walk by this one house. And it stood out to me because it was surrounded by these homes that had trees growing through them or were half missing. But Mrs. Green was her name. I stopped to talk to her one day. She really took care of her place. She watered her plants and mowed her lawn in a floor-length dashiki, and I just felt like I wanted to know her story, and it felt like she had seen a lot and like she had lots to say, and so that was my sort of imagining of a younger Mrs. Green, what she might have looked like before the hurricane. As part of that residency, I got to work with Miss Simone's 6th grade class, art classes, plural, at Rochelle Middle School. And their annual budget for art supplies was $180 for the entire school, which, as you could imagine, would barely buy a couple pencils for everybody. So I used the North Carolina Arts Grant money to buy a bunch of supplies that they could use throughout the year. And we did a self-portrait collage project. And they were all really excited. This was their favorite part, was just like having their photo taken. It was really hard to get their attention otherwise. They're like, "Oh, you want to take my photo?" And we completed this project together, and then we put on an exhibition at the local arts council. I thought that by seeing their work displayed in a gallery-like setting and receiving praise from their community, they might be inspired to keep making art. The arts council was literally on the other side of the tracks in a clearly segregated town, and this was a severely underserved group. And I wanted to show them that these spaces in this community were just as much for them as they were for anybody else. And that was something that I was thinking a lot about at that time. Why is the art world so white? I like to think that we're beyond the days of selection committees actively refusing people of color, hopefully. And so it must not just be about getting so many applicants of color for things like exhibitions, residencies, workshops, professional positions. The issues must be related more to awareness and accessibility, I guess. Still trying to find this answer. I don't think that there is one simple answer, but it's a question that, yeah, plagues me. This was one of my favorite works from that workshop. This kid hated me. He hated school. He did not want to be there. But then he like cranked this out at the last minute. And I was like, oh, that's cute. I'm proud of you. You may recognize the woman in this picture. Oh! So I'd been having a lot of these sorts of conversations with friends at that time, like I mentioned. But it wasn't until I met this woman, Annie Evelyn, the head of your wood department, and had been having some conversations about the glaring lack of racial and ethnic diversity in our field, that our community was inspired to do something about it. There had been a lot of people sort of pointing fingers and expecting other people to do the work to right the wrongs that have been done. And aside from Annie being an incredible teacher, which I know a lot of you can speak to personally, she is a highly motivational person and somebody who will put her community and other communities ahead of her own needs time and time again. And I'm going to get a little bit emotional thinking about it because she's just, I think, a very special person and someone that VCU is very lucky to have. And, wood is historically like one of the worst areas in terms of diversity. Super white, super masculine sort of media. And I think the wood program at VCU today is more diverse racially and as far as gender is concerned than it ever has been. And I think that is in large part due to the work Annie Evelyn has been doing here. So Annie had this great idea. She was living in New Orleans after her residency at Penland, and she discovered this place called Yaya. And the last two photos that you saw were of our very first two scholarship recipients. She thought, this place is great. They already have a large, diverse student body that is interested in the arts and could stand to be connected with more opportunities in the arts and shown, a potential pathway into the field. And so she decided that we should partner with Yaya and provide opportunities for their students. And so we formed this organization. It's called Crafting the Future, which is better than our first idea, which was to call it Black Craft, which, if you Google that, is like a witchcraft thing. Shout out to all the witches. Y'all are cool. But wanted to leave that space for you. And so yeah, we started this organization. It wasn't just the two of us. It was a big group of artists from Penland who were all equally interested in seeing how we could mix things up in the field. And we came together and we pulled our resources and we made a Kickstarter and we raised $8,000, which was enough to send 2 students to Penland, and it would fully fund their experience. So we're trying to think about all of the different barriers to entry. So we weren't going to just pay for their tuition. We wanted to also pay for their room and board, their travel, their materials, and we also pay a per diem so that they can cover daily expenses or, if they need to send that money to somebody at home because they need to be away for 2 weeks and can't help with the phone bill or whatever, then they can use that money for that. That has developed a lot. Crafting the Future, you'll hear me talk a little bit more about it in a bit, but we've sort of developed into not just scholarship opportunities, but lots of different opportunities, thinking about sort of holistic approach to supporting an artist. While I was saying all of that, there was just more images of paintings. So like I said, have really spent a lot of time developing that series that started at Penland, and thinking about Black and brown folk and queer folk and making space again for them to just be and to rest and to eat and to embrace one another. And sometimes they're embellished. I work from photographs. A lot of times what you see is what was happening in that moment, but a lot of times I will embellish. The night sky might peek in where the ceiling is supposed to be, or maybe you'll see a Carrie James Marshall hanging above a thrift store couch. And I see these moments as sort of aspirational, I guess, of like a world where these people who have been othered by society can live their life to the fullest in the most realized way and start to own our own culture in a way that we haven't been permitted to maybe in the past. So these days I am doing a lot of crafting the future work, but I do still have time to make paintings and glass. Um, a lot of these, well, all of these works that you've seen since the beautiful picture of Annie were created since I moved to Los Angeles in 2019. And when I first got there, I was making glass. I was working for Joe Cariotti, a glass blower who has a beautiful studio practice. He employs lots of makers. And he was really gracious to give me a space of my own to work in within his studio. And so I would help him make glass all day, and then I would get off the clock and I would go into this like hot, dusty ass, tiny little space and I would paint my little heart out. And yeah, I eventually worked up the courage to quit working for him and just start making my art full time. Not that there's anything wrong with working for another maker. I think that's a beautiful way of making a living and still using your hands and your skills and all of that. Um, Back to crafting the future, I want to tell you about some of the other things that we've been up to since that first round of scholarships. We started a program called Better Together. This was the image from the first one on the left. It was in Los Angeles at Joe Cariotti's studio, and it was for Black History Month. We wanted to celebrate Black and Brown makers by hosting an event where we had a pop-up market where people could vend for free, and we would have workshops for the public, and we would have um, a marketplace. We had demonstrations, there were live performances, and it was just like a real happening. And that's developed into this thing that sort of looks different depending on the place that's hosting it. That last image was from the Pittsburgh Glass Center, where we had our last Better Together event. And the place that has been really kind to me and my development as an artist. But that was a different program. It was a residency program that we developed. It's sort of like a mentor-mentee program where we pair somebody who is less experienced with glass and somebody who is more experienced, and we give them 10 days to just work together. And I think it's really great because we are thinking a lot about representation in that program and in a lot of the programs that we have, where it's not just about the opportunity, but it's about making sure that there are people in the space where a young Black or brown artist can have an example of somebody who looks like them in a position that they may want to be in someday. I think that's something that we don't often think about. Our scholarship program has really grown. Just before this was an image, sorry, I'm trying to keep up, from our local Los Angeles residency program, where we have 2 artists at a time who have free studio space and a material stipend for a year, as well as mentorship opportunities and exhibition opportunities. Um, our scholarship program has grown from that first year where we served just 2 artists to today where we serve over 40 artists every summer. So that's pretty incredible. Thank you. Thank you. And we're also lucky to be able to be flexible and to support artists who come to us and past recipients when they have a big idea, like Laverne Kemp from the last image, who wanted to host an indigo dyeing workshop at her studio with an organization she runs called Women of Vision in Pittsburgh. So we were able to really amplify or multiply the sort of impact of that program. These are images from the Teen Takeover at Appalachian Center for Craft, part of Tennessee Tech, which Annie also helped to pilot that program. We were thinking about different ways of serving our community. A lot of the youth arts organizations we work with have younger artists who are not old enough to go to, say, Penland or Pilchuck or Haystack. And so we developed a program that could serve youth and where everybody in the program was a person of color, not just the students, but the teachers, the teaching assistants, even the chef. And we're going to be running that program again at Oxbow School of Art and Artist Residency Program in Saugatuck, Michigan next year. We also, through the Wingate Foundation, were able to run a Better Together residency at Penland, where each artist was given a $10,000 grant in addition to their 2-week residency. So that was really incredible. And we've done a couple of different versions of like internship. That last image was from collaboration with Glassroots a youth serving program in Newark, New Jersey, where we have an internship where the intern works at both Glassroots and Urban Glass, another organization that's in the city. So we're thinking about, catching somebody as they're aging out of a program and showing them how they might have a next step into their career. And I already forgot what the last image was of. What was it? 3 gentlemen in front of a store? That could have been anything. Who knows? These next few images are from an exhibition that I had in Los Angeles, 2023, I think. And this was, I guess, the second time that I decided to show my paintings and my glass alongside each other. And the gallery that I was showing with at the time also had a vintage furniture shop, and so I got to work with them to curate these little moments, and create sort of vignettes where the work could exist. And I think it worked really well to be able to have time with the paintings and visualize them in a space where you might also visualize the painting living, but also give an opportunity for like objects that existed in the painting to come out and exist in 3 dimensions. And it was on sort of Museum Row in downtown Los Angeles, right next to there was like a Basquiat show at next door, and then gosh, I'm forgetting all the names of the museums. The Broad was across the street. Anyways, it felt like an opportunity to talk about curation and to think about the objects that we covet as a society, and why something gets deemed important. Is it because of the person who made it or lived with it or what? But I feel like a lot of times, um, objects that are important to certain communities might get left out of conversations. And so I was trying to have a conversation about that. This is some works that I made for a show at the Pittsburgh Glass Center. It sounds like that's the only place I ever am. I swear I go other places. Um, but I started making these face jugs somewhat recently, thinking about early American pottery and face jugs and the people who made them. A lot of times these jugs were made by enslaved makers and signed by their owner. Um, and so I've just been enjoying being in conversation with those unsung makers and some contemporary makers as well who are keeping that tradition alive. This was a piece made in collaboration with Thurman Statham, who is a very important figure in early American studio glass. He's one of the first, I would say, African American artists of note in that field. And it was really a great opportunity to work with him, get to make that object together. We also, the first face jugs that I made were with Thurman as well. He's become a great mentor of mine. And randomly, I've been quilting as well. I discovered at a point where I just really needed an infusion of sort of inspiration. Um, this place in Chatsworth, California, that's called Quilting for Community. And I wonder if I can back up. Is that going to work? Yeah. So this image here is from a show that I had in Denver at the Center for Visual Art there. And I made, in collaboration with some of the quilters from Quilting for Community, this house. You can see it from the outside on the left, and on the inside, when you enter, you could see the amalgamation of all of these different quilt tops sewn together by these different makers. And yeah, it was just this idea about like sort of creating space, creating your own space, when others maybe aren't making it for you, and thinking about the power of community and collaboration. And um, yeah, I really love that place, Quilting for Community. It's a really great organization where they teach quilting classes to I wonder if this is going to keep going now. Did I mess it up? Okay, I think it's going now. They teach free quilting classes. All you have to do is donate your first quilt to somebody who is in hospice or who is unhoused. And it just felt like a reminder that craft has a distinct power to not just be a commodity, but to be something that can provide, and that craft education can also similarly be about providing for others. So we're getting close to the end here, and I'm just going to show you some of like the latest things that I've been working on. This is a portrait that I did of Crafting the Future Deputy Director Shay Spriggs, who might be embarrassed for me to be showing this at this scale, but I don't think so. um, and you can see that quilt in the foreground there. The sort of quilt theme has permeated everything that I'm doing lately. Um, Even the glasswork. So these patterns here were created, or I should say modeled after a log cabin quilt block. So through the research I've been doing, I learned that this particular block was used on the Underground Railroad to signal safety to those who were seeking it on their journey towards freedom. So if you saw a quilt hanging on the outside of a barn or strung up outside of a house, and it had that particular block on it, especially if it had a red or a yellow center, you knew that that was somewhere that was safe for you to stop for a night. And so these ones are actually painted, and some of those other face jugs I showed you earlier were painted as well. And that has been really refreshing for me lately to take a moment to sort of unlearn all of the technique. I spent a long time trying to figure out how to create pattern in glass and imagery on glass in a way that is deemed archival or academically acceptable. And I've just found that a lot of possibilities open up when you reject that for a moment or take a moment to just put that aside and slap some house paint on the outside of a piece of glass. um, this is Tarek Gutierrez, who is the Crafting the Future studio coordinator. Um, that program, I'm also happy to talk to anybody about. We're about to open up the application for that again, and it's really better for somebody who is in Los Angeles, but because we don't yet have funding to provide housing, but we're working on it so that we can have people come from out of town. But I find that it's really great for local artists or people who want to relocate to Los Angeles because it gives you free studio space and community, like instant community in this space where there are, 7 or 8 other makers. And we try to create programming to bring in local curators and gallerists and artists to have conversations with the artists. Um, I'm also doing a fair bit of teaching these days, and I have started teaching this class, and I teach it every year at Oxbow. I don't know why they want me to teach the same class every year, but I do, and I love it. And it's about creating a collaborative tablescape. So it's an introduction to glassblowing, but we're creating this tablescape where we make everything from the plates to cups, bowls, serving vessels, and then we have a big feast where we dine off of them. And similar to that slide that I opened on with the image from the demonstration at the Glass Art Society conference, the students get tricked in a way where it's like it's not about the object as much as it is about the process of making it and the opportunity to like be in community with one another over that feast where like nothing will taste so good as it does out of a handmade cup. So that's pretty much all I got. I wanted to end by sharing this video that we had made at Crafting the Future last year, just to give you a little bit of a deeper idea about what we do and why we do it. I worked as a glassblower for 10 years before I ever worked day job with another Black artist. Once we started doing this work through Crafting the Future and providing scholarships for Black and brown makers, and once I started seeking out actively a more diverse community for myself, I realized like what I had been missing. How much freer I was to create, to converse, and to just be myself, unapologetically and without fear.
I did not envision myself as an artist when I was younger. I didn't even see this as a possibility, especially in a full-time sense. Sometimes we put ourselves in boxes, or I don't know, things just don't seem as possible when you don't see people that look like you doing the things.
Being Filipino in the art community, it's already difficult as it is because like art was not something that was taught in our home. When I was living in the Philippines, we didn't have TV or anything like that, and so my uncle would send these National Geographic magazines every month to us, and that was kind of like my way to the world. And I feel like a lot of me doing that is just trying to find myself within my art.
Being around other great artists, it's truly transformed me as an artist.
Being in this space and having the open opportunity and being able to express my art in the way I want, it helps us grow and it helps the art grow as well.
It just really changes everything. The way that you enter the shop in the morning, the music you put on, the ideas you express, the conversations you have outside of the studio that are fueling your work and practice. Don't get discouraged, try one more. It's one thing to like create space for someone or even provide them the funds to like come and enter a space, but then how else do you make that person feel like they are welcome and like they want to stay? And at Crafting the Future, we're still learning what that looks like and aiming to be an example so that as we travel through these spaces, we can see more and more people of color, more diverse stories being told, story being preserved that includes all of the people on this planet and not just the ones who historically have been given the wall space or the pages in the books. Everybody should be touching the rail. Cedric, Tyler, that's me, get in there. Touch that rail. And I just want to end by saying that I'm really grateful to be here. Thank you all. And I think that craft education is really important, and some of the best craft educators that I know are in this room. And so if any of you, I know we're largely students in here, but have an opportunity to invest in this program, I think now is the time. Thank you.
It's messed up. Poker.
Yes, Rosita. I think we have a few minutes for questions.
Yeah, sorry, I droned on.
Does
But
anyone
Brady, that was by design.
have a question for Corey?
Thank you. I know there are a lot of students in the room and we're at VCU, but my question is with crafting the future, is there any advice you would give to an older artist moving out into the field whose work is mature, but a lot of people haven't seen it yet? And is there an age cap for crafting the future and its services?
There is not. We have served artists from ages 15 to 88. And I'm happy to expand those boundaries and looking for opportunities to do so. And I don't think that there's any time that is too late. I've heard many tales of artists who have started their careers late in life. I'm thinking of one example right now whose name is escaping me. Um, a very famous collage artist who, well, Romare Bearden, sure, Harlem Renaissance, but I'm thinking of a more contemporary. Anyways, what is it? No, not that one. See, look, there's lots of them. um, yeah, but my point is, I don't think it's too late, and I think that there's lots of opportunities too. I can't speak for everybody, but I serve on a lot of juries these days, sort of making decisions about who gets a scholarship or a grant or this or that. And I think I'm asked to do that because they know that I'm going to come and look at the applicants through the lens of like who has not been afforded these opportunities as much or who gets overlooked at times. And I think, if anything, like right now, well, gosh, we might be on the way out of that period. But I think current administration aside, we're in an era where people value artists with varying experience and backgrounds, and I think that there's lots of opportunities for you, both as somebody who's investing in their career a little bit later in life, and as a person of color, and as a woman. And I think a lot of people take issue with being afforded opportunity based on such things, but I'm not one of those people. And the one piece of advice that I like to offer to folks from um, marginalized groups, we'll say, is to take those opportunities and worry about proving to them all the other reasons that you deserve to be in the room after they open the door. Yeah. Thank you for that question. Okay. How you doing, Justin?
Hi, thank you so much for that talk. I was wondering, how do you handle pushback from people who like feel threatened by like diversity work and who don't necessarily like understand why it's important?
Mm, that's a good question. How do you handle pushback from people who feel threatened? I don't know. I mean, I just keep on keeping on, you know? It's hard. I feel like two ways about it. Like one is like, yes, like actually ignore that person and move along. But then and this maybe isn't your question, but it's making me think about um like sort of safety concerns once somebody does find themselves in a space with folks who don't want them to be there or don't think that they got there in the right way. And I think we're dealing with that at Crafting the Future a little bit. And um, from where I sit, I try to have just conversations and be really um, clear with people who we partner with that this is not just an opportunity for you to check a box and feel good about creating a seat at the table, but you have to also think about ways of making the people who you've invited into the room feel safe and welcome and like they belong there. And it sucks because it doesn't feel like that should be our job to like explain that to folks, but someone's got to do it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for walking up here. My bad.
Yeah, y'all are working these questions.
Yeah, I'm someone who's been at VCU Craft for, this is my final year now. And honestly, I can't imagine like my life any different. Like I wasn't expecting to be an artist or anything like this. At the same time, as I've been here, it's clear that in an academic setting, in a historical setting, craft doesn't get the respect that it deserves. And it's like fighting an uphill battle. Do you have any advice about fighting that uphill battle and getting craft the respect, funding, etc. it deserves.
Yeah, that's a good question. Put some respect on my name. It's craft. I actually find in a lot of shows that I'm seeing in LA right now and in other places that I travel around the world that there is a little bit of respect being put on our name and that people are valuing finally or again and maybe the same way that they did in like the 70s craft and like the hand and lumpy ceramics and things like that. um but I think to my point, those things come and go, and like a trend towards the handmade uh, will come and it will go. And as long as we sort of like persist in what we do, we're, you'll have your moment of being recognized for that. But also, being able to look at it as not such a black and white uh, issue. you know, as a crafts person, all of the things that you're gaining here at VCU are tools in your tool belt. And the things that you make are the things that you make. And like sometimes that will be some like deeply provocative personal piece of art with the concept that you've been developing for 2 decades. And other times that could be a mug that's going to make somebody's coffee taste really good. And knowing that both of those things are equally valuable and that there's lots of space in between and that you possess the tools to articulate what it is that you've got going on inside of your head, that I think can take you far.
Do we have time for more? One more question?
One more, baby.
Make it count.
Thank you. I was thinking, especially in the context of it being school, talk about having it all and what you let go to have, to make the things that matter to you, both as works of art and as community.
When you say have it all, you mean like having the like resources, the studios at your disposal?
No, how you pick your day, your objectives. What things do you not do, and you
Oh,
have
so
shunned?
I am the wrong person to ask about that because I fill my plate until it is spilling over, and I'm not always great at like prioritizing the right things. I don't know what the right things are, but like I mean today Annie and I handled some crafting the future business, and then I went and did a site visit for a prospective residency program here in Richmond, and then I came and then I did a finance committee Zoom, and then I came here for a lovely tour from Egbert, and now I'm here with you all, and I am gonna feel probably pretty bad tonight. So I'm exhausted, and I just got home from Lisbon yesterday. So I don't know. Sometimes I just be doing too much. I know that's not like the answer that you wanted, but it's the truth. Um, I
I feel like
think,
we're always doing that though, right? As an artist, I feel like we're always kind of multitasking
yeah,
and trying to find that thing that sticks, and whether it's in the studio practice or whether it's, day-to-day things you have to do to exist as an artist, which is kind of what you're talking about, right? But even in your own studio, we were just talking a little bit about, we have a lot of different things going on, and you just keep trying different things till something sticks, and that's it's kind of finding that, what is that Sonia said, authentic obsession, right? um I don't know if that answers your question either, but I feel like we're always, as artists, I think we're always trying different things. We're constantly juggling, life with studio. Even within the studio, you're painting, you're, that director, you're doing glass work. And when it comes to glass work, you're always having to, work with other artists as assistants.
I will say that like within the studio practice part of all of that, I try to make time to both like create with fierce intention and also just play and like let whatever it is that's inside of myself out without having to explain it or justify it or link it to this or that.
I think that's so important. And I think about that all the time. I feel like, when I used to teach, I always used to tell students, like, you have to remember why you started. We didn't start because we wanted to justify all these reasons in a critique, right? We started because there was something in us that, beckoned to come into existence, whether it's an object or whether it's a painting or whether it's a video. So it's this idea of continuing to play regardless of how crappy your day was. I think that's really important.
Yeah. And there's a lot to be gained potentially from those moments of play or those moments of focusing on some more administrative stuff that might not seem like it's fueling you. But
And I think artists make really bad work all the time. Oh, constantly. And I think people that say otherwise, they have to be either lying or they just maybe not challenging themselves to make that bad work in order to like make the next thing that's exciting.
yeah.
So we just don't like to talk about it. But we do it in private.
But it's good to have a little bit of that. What did we call it? Generative doubt.
That's right.
Whatever that means. Thank you all so much. I also just want to plug real quick that Crafting the Future is having a Double Your Impact campaign right now where every gift that is new or increased is being doubled by the Wingate Foundation through the end of October. So if you feel like joining our efforts, even $5 turns into 10. And if you're interested in learning how our programs can support you, you can reach out at any time, join our newsletter. It used to be up there, but it's craftingthefuture.org. You'll find out lots of helpful information.
Well, thank you, Corey. Please join me in thanking Corey for being here and